Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. We're glad you're here. Subscribe to it and give this video a like.
Also, we have this little thing called a podcast down below in the description. Subscribe to that as well. Share it with your friends. If you're younger than us, it's really hard to quantify his relationship with Brett Favre and the love he had for him and the power in which he had to make him such a star. And Brett was, if you never listened to the volume of Brett Favre games in the 90s, like if you had to do the rankings, I was thinking about this today, it'd probably be Michael Jordan in the 90s would be an easy number one. It might be like Ken Griffey Jr. would be like number two. Brett Favre would be in the top five, right? Just fame, star power. He'd probably be three. And depending on what you like, he might be ahead of Griffey Jr. If Michael's a lock number one, like Brett might have been number two. And I think the love John Madden had for him, and he was right. Like he put all of his chips in the middle, and you got to feel a little bit in the documentary. And it's hard. I mean, there's so much going on over a timeline. But when I think John Madden, I think his love of Brett, but not just. It's just the way he played, right? Like and ultimately, like what he stood for, the All Madden team was like everything really Brett kind of encapsulated. Like you'd have to drag him off the field, which you literally did at the end of his career. And the way he played. Now, I do wonder if there are some similarities because you and I never witnessed this guy, but like Kenny the Snake Stabler from the South, total tough guy, throwback. Everyone just was everyone's favorite player, but kind of freelance too. Like to me, and again, I know Andy's good friends with John, is like they're kind of these California open mind. Like not every coach would the Shanahans have liked Kenny the Snake Stabler. Like he fucking just does his own shit, you know? Andy would have loved him. John did love him. Brett Favre, he's Andy's favorite player. There's just the way they were wired, that type guy, it makes sense. He would have loved Brady too, because Brady's really he did, early on. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, if he, in the peak of his career, just got to call him for 20 years, I think Brady and Manning, he would have. And he did. Peyton even said it. He's like, it was a big deal when John said, like, these guys are coming, watch out. And Peyton was like, we couldn't really say it because we'd be like, who the fuck are these guys? But it was like, okay, we might be onto something.
I love one of the best stories from that documentary was Peyton talking about Pawpaw, his grandpa. He was like, every week Pawpaw would ask me, is John Madden doing your game? This was his rookie year when they were terrible. He's like, no, Pawpaw, not this week. John doesn't do our games. But then they got a primetime game against
the Cowboys.
Against Dallas, yeah. Yeah. And so because of that, Madden was there. And there's something to be said for, people who are the show, and there aren't a lot of them like him, where it's like when he shows up, it's a big game, but it's also a big game because Madden is there.
Does it exist anymore?
Well, I do think, I think there's some of that stuff. Like, I don't think it's on Madden's level. It's going to be hard to ever go back to Madden's level because there's just more options. Everything it's true. It's cliche now that people say things get segmented and broken up, but it's true. It was just,
that's a fact.
There are fewer TV shows and
it's not arguable. If there's 20 basketball games on, if you put one on, the one's going to be more important than the 20. I mean,
So there was a quote. I went back and read some of you remember the oral history of how Fox took the NFL, that the Ringer wrote it 3 years ago or something.
Yeah. And
one of the quotes in it is Jerry Jones talking about why he built the stadium he built. And he's one of the things he basically said was, well, 50% of the money I spent was just so John Madden would come to the stadium and tell people, you got to come to the stadium. Like kind of kidding, but kind of just saying like John Madden there's an old phrase people used to use called tastemaker. Now you probably use the word influencer. But impressing John Madden was part of what Jerry thought was important. And I think that's just his way of saying, like, what John said mattered. What John said was good was good. What John said was bad was bad. What John said was impressive was impressive. Like, John was probably the most trusted person the NFL's ever had. And maybe it's the greatest spokesperson the sport has ever had.
Wouldn't you say he's one of the all-time great in the history of American capitalism, one of the greatest salesmen that's ever existed?
You mean because of the sports or because of like his advertising stuff?
I'm just saying he sold the sport of football
Yeah.
on all the broadcasts and made people love football. Like he was essentially a sales guy for the NFL. And for them and the networks, it was worth it because you were coming to watch him, and then he would just sell you, and you just fell in love with the sport. And most people never played the sport / understand the sport. And it was like you just wanted to – he would just convince you because he would convince you on players, which I think a big reason – and again, Favre won MVPs. I think Madden took his stardom, sold the American people on Brett Favre to another level. It's one thing I've been thinking about the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I think he probably did.
I think he's one of the most important sports figures in the history of America.
I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, because football is the biggest sport that the country's ever had. And I think I heard Greg Papa say it. Greg said some version of this as well. Somebody else said some version of, I think it was, did Belichick say it? That he's the most significant figure in the history of the sport. And it's the biggest sport it's the biggest sport this country's ever seen now. So, yeah, I mean, it automatically makes him one of the biggest sports figures in the country's history. For like a million reasons, because your 70-year-old was watching him and your 9-year-old was playing his video game.
See, and if I was like a consultant and the CBS guy with Romo, for example, like Madden was worth it for the networks paying that. If you look back at Romo, and part of it is ego, CBS finds Romo. They take a huge swing. They kick Phil Simms off the broadcast. They put him with Nance, and it works. And then because you just signed like a couple-year contract, like you're not getting a 10-year, you're not Patrick Mahomes, all of a sudden he's a free agent, and ESPN comes at him. Now, they have an ego. They don't want to lose Tony Romo to Monday night. I don't think anyone would have fucking noticed after a couple years if they would have just gone with, whoever the next guy is. Now, it might have been bad they might have had to move multiple guys over a couple-year period, which clearly they don't want to do. But Romo doesn't pencil because he doesn't draw any eyeballs. And that's the difference of like Madden, of like Romo's just, and listen, I'm not counting his pockets, but I could put Greg Olsen there and they would get the exact same rating. That just wasn't true with John Madden. Because at the time, like to get people, obviously there was less places for people to go, but football was not as popular nationally anywhere near what it is now. Like we're going to watch football whether, John Middlekauff's calling the game or whether Tony Romo's calling it. It doesn't matter where it did then. And they all admitted it. That's why he always had this bidding process because of how much better.
Part of it was Fox was not viewed as a sports network, and they legitimized themselves by hiring John. Once they got John to sign on, right?
What do you think Pat signed for? Like 5 for 5 or something?
See, I don't think the CBS broadcast ratings go down if Romo's not there, but like you mentioned Greg Olsen. I think Greg Olsen might be the best analyst on TV going right now. He's on the short list of guys. So, does your rating go down? No, but like I think Monday Night Football would feel different if Tony Romo was doing it. Like I do think there's just a basic level of like we need a star doing the star game. If this is what it costs, it doesn't pencil necessarily, but we're still making money in the end. And the one thing we know is we have a star doing this game, and it's going to feel big because of that. Because he's also going to do the Super Bowl. Can you trust him in that moment to do the best possible broadcast? So I don't know, at a certain number, I don't know how it quote unquote pencils, but I disagree on Romo, just that I think he has clearly quickly established himself as.
Yeah, bar's low with the group. It's hard.
Well,
I'm not, and I talk a lot of shit. I couldn't do it. I don't have any aspirations to do it. It's a very difficult role to do. And it's clear there's been a small percentage. Like, there have been more good football players than there have been good analysts. Most analysts, historically, are just not good. And some of the most famous people, Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith, Joe Montana, Bill Walsh, like, fail at it immediately. So I'm not trying to act like Tony, he's obviously better than the majority of people, but it just shows what a different level that John was on, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, John was, yeah. How about, not only did Montana turn down EA Sports first, what I read, but Joe Kapp, who was the head coach at Cal, then turned it down. Then they got to Madden.
It was going to be Cap football?
Maybe they're just going to call it EA Sports Football. I don't know. It was going to be Montana. Did I say Cap or Nap? Or was it Nap? I think it was Nap. K-N-A-P-P.
Gotcha.
And then I got to Madden. And then somebody told me that before they went to George Foreman, it was going to be Hulk Hogan. that was going to get the grill. And Hulk said no, because Hulk was doing a blender deal. And so then it got to Foreman.
See, on
like
things like that, there's a huge, and I bet John would have told you till the day he died. Like, there's an element of luck with the blenders, the grills, the video games, like what pops and what doesn't, right? There's a huge timing element
there is,
to it.
but you know what? Somebody else getting Madden football, would Montana getting Madden football have done the same? Maybe the video game would have been just as big, but it would not be the same if it was Montana football. I don't.
Well, they talked about it in the thing, right? It was Tecmo and Madden, and then Madden just wiped. Tecmo disappeared. I mean, so it was like Uber and Lyft, but like one of them just, and then you just becomes Lyft, right? That's what Madden did. But the Foreman Grill is a good example. Maybe George Foreman was just that big of a star.
Yeah, Foreman probably would have been fine. Everybody had a Foreman in college that I knew.
And it was a great product, right? You just throw something on there and cook it. It worked. It was a legit, and like Madden, it was legit.
Yeah. But the documentary is great for anybody. I think one other part about him, you kind of forget. He did this incredible thing where he's so well respected, revered, but also is kind of goofy when he wants to be. You know, like, I think that's fun. To me, I thought all the commercials I don't remember those commercials for the most part. I don't know if you do. I didn't remember the Miller Lite commercials. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. You don't remember Tough Actin' to Actin'?
Tough Actin' to Actin', I remember. Yeah. Boom! Tough Actin' to Actin'. Really a great commercial. But I loved all those things in that documentary because it was like, I didn't know. I mean, I knew, oh, look at this water cooler. That's the mama water cooler, and that's the daddy water cooler. And over here, this is the baby water cooler. He was so good at being goofy, but not, he wasn't sometimes you say goofy, like, oh, is it kind of like a clown? Like, no, not at all like that. Just a super, my favorite part was all the clips of him just like walking into random diners. Like, I thought that stuff was awesome. Like that he took the bus, just got off the bus. People would come up to him, hanging out outside of the restaurant, taking pictures with him.
Well, one thing that he had built into his life that these guys now just don't, because he refused to fly, is you end up having to stop to eat somewhere. And times were different, so it was probably a little more normal to do stuff like that now. But when Jim Nantz, and obviously Jim, now here's the thing. Madden is one of the most relatable guys that really is not that relatable. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He has a massive house. He has a bigger house than Jim Nantz at Pebble Beach. I've heard it's not even close. Like, John Madden has a compound there. Like, he spends a lot of time in the Carmel area. I wouldn't be shocked if he owns like 5 homes there. But John felt like just kind of an everyman guy. And some of that is anytime you're a little fatter, I think you're just a little more relatable. I think they've done studies on that. Because the one thing, his fat, like, face, and he's just a big guy, wears it well.
And a unique looking person.
Yeah, he felt pretty.
His big eyebrows.
Unique's probably. Red hair when he was young.
Did you see?
I wonder how
Belichick's quote was, the one thing about John Madden is you never mistook anybody else for John Madden. Like, from 30 yards away, you're like, that's John Madden.
When he retired at 42 years old or whatever, and Al, in the peak of his powers, right? Like, sharp as ever, crazy as ever. If it just warmed, like, he just working for Al Davis was not easy. Like, do you think that was a reason? Because they were winning.
Good, absolutely.
And he's just like, I'm gonna jump off a cliff. I can't do this another 10 years. Because
yeah,
he wasn't gonna get fired. They were kicked. He went to 7 conference finals.
He has the best winning percentage of any coach in the history of the league that coached at least 100 games.
They had a Hall of Famer at every position group, and several. Think about that. They were really good. They just happened to be in the conference with Pittsburgh. If they weren't, they would have been in way more Super Bowls because they got to the Super Bowl and they dominated. But it's just hard to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? They ended up winning 4. It's one of those things, like, they sound bitter now, but I think a lot of guys from the 90s be like, God damn, if Michael wasn't around, I would have fucking had 2. Right?
Yeah. Yep. It's been cool watching a bunch of
I think he was friends with a lot of coaches in the NFL, especially the older group, like the Andy Reid, Belichick. I think they talked to him. You'd be surprised. Not you. I think people would be like his interactions and his friend group. I can't even imagine how massive it was of just, like the Ron Rivera, just guys older that I'm sure, especially the California guys. Because it's a natural bond. I say it all the time. There there's a natural bond when you're from somewhere. It's like the Ohio guys, all kind of like the California guys. Like, you know, you saw Steve Mariucci last night on TV crying. I bet Andy's pretty shook. I mean, these guys just, you idolize people when you're kind of from a similar area as them who do what you want to do or are involved in what you want to do. It's just a natural human instinct.
Yeah, I think he was a lot of friends with a lot of people. Like Mooch said in his NFL, you texted me like Mooch is on NFL Network, so I flipped it on yesterday, and the story about how Madden has like a room, you know, with a bunch of TVs and all his friends and family come over, and he's like there'd be parents of players that come over, like anybody wants to come hang. John has food, everyone's just hanging out watching football. And then I was texting with a buddy yesterday who works in football and knows some of the guys who were on those like original Madden crews. There was one guy in the piece, I think his name was Jimmy with a Z was his last name, but he's in it a lot. And he said he said Madden would text that guy Madden would text that guy every week watching your game, something like that. I think Madden sent a lot of text messages.
That guy still works games.
Yeah. So
did you know that he went to Oregon out of high school?
Had no idea.
Did you know that John Robinson played at Oregon?
Did not know that.
They were friends. I mean,
I thought John Robinson went to Oregon too.
They went together. John hated it and left.
And which John hated and left?
Madden.
He got like a knee injury, I thought I read, right?
He got kind of banged up, but he said he hated the weather and he just hated it. So he ended up in Cal Poly.
He went to College of San Mateo first. Madden.
No, he went to Oregon, then he went to San Mateo, then he goes to Cal Poly.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So but Robinson he knew from like
grew up in Daly City together or whatever.
I did not know that.
He does a football life that I was watching on NFL Network before the new documentary came up. They used to play this game. You know, two fat guys getting ice cream, and they would play this game, bite or no bite.
Wait. Who would play this game?
John Robinson
and John Madden,
former USC coach and LA Rams coach, and John Madden. Same age, best friends. You each get a double ice cream cone, and if you can say bite or no bite first, I don't exactly know the timing of this. You get a bite of the other guy's ice cream, and he couldn't touch yours. So what Madden would do the moment he would get the ice cream cone, he would spit on the ice cream. So no one would want to do the bite on his ice cream. He said the only person out of all of his friends, every human he ever met, would still bite the ice cream was John Robinson. So they were both kind of these crazy football guys. And then, obviously, I mean, John Robinson didn't quite have the career Madden had, but he became a pretty famous football guy, right, in his career.
I mean, ice creams are pretty relatable. No, I mean, he coached USC.
Yeah.
I just happened to watch a clip of like all the cut up of like the Doug Peterson. All right, man, let's finish up this meeting. Well, I'm going to treat you to some ice cream. Have you seen that cut up?
Yeah.
I'm going to treat you to some ice cream. He always said, I'm going to treat you to some vanilla ice cream. That shit we had last week, that was not Haagen-Dazs. But
yeah. So
the great thing is John Madden did TV. There is an endless supply of great John Madden clips out there. I got to watch Madden was on Letterman. I got somebody, our buddy John Dickinson sent me that yesterday. I haven't watched it.
It was good.
Is it good? Is that the one where he's talking about the number 38 or the number 83? You can't put 83 on a big fat guy.
Yeah, you can only put like the same numbers. And then Dave goes, "What was your number?" He's like 77. I was a big fat guy. And he talks about the rats at the Coliseum. It's honestly, Dave's a little uncomfortable at the time. Like Dave is not Dave yet. John was John. Like John owned it. John honestly felt like Chris Farley. Like a buttoned-up Chris Farley is who he felt like watching him talk with Dave. Like he owned the interview. He was the alpha of the two. Now, if it would have been awesome to see like 1996 Dave with that John, it would have been.
Well, Dave got good when he stopped caring.
He was stiff. Dave was stiff in that.
Yeah, he was. You know, Dave's kind of awkward anyway.
Yeah,
it's part of his charm. What was the uncle's name? Uncle Rube.
Uncle Rube.
I love that Favre's like, now I don't want to say too much, but Uncle Rube had did he say a big testicle? What did he say?
He said a big sack. Testicle? A big sack.
All right, that's an Uncle Rube. That part was fantastic. Just seeing, That's back to your
John's
point.
face when he was old, so he wasn't going to play the game, but he was like, he knew what they were talking about.
It's like, yeah, Uncle Rube.
Didn't he call it an Uncle Rube? He's like, oh, he just did an Uncle Rube.
Yeah, it was Reggie White sacked him. He's like, nah, it's the Uncle Rube. We're like, can you imagine what Favre and his buddies thought about that?
God. Wasn't it Favre's like brother-in-law's dad or something?
Well, they just said Favre just said he had some buddies from college in town, and one of them, we just get to talking. He's asking me who I have in town, and somehow Uncle Rube comes up.
Because that's what Favre's deal was. Like, most guys would come in about the game. John would be like, what'd you have for dinner last night? Like, they would just start talking. I don't think that exists much.
Who you got coming to the game?
Yeah, I already missed John Madden.
It's funny, man. I'd been wondering, you see some people tweet here and there, oh, he texted so-and-so after a game or whatever, but he'd really disappeared, at least to my eye, to public life. Although I saw Cam Inman, who's interviewed him a lot over the years, and I think had spent some time with him, lives near him, had, been in contact with him a little bit. But
remember there was a health scare a couple years ago that it was like something happened.
I'd forgotten until Derek Papa reminded me that in like 2015, during one of our shows, a particular boss came running down the hallway declaring John Madden's died. And if Derek Papa had not fact-checked that information, it would have ended up on the air. I don't know where that came from, but do you remember that? Like 2015?
Not well, but sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really remember it either until Derek kind of broke the story down for me. It didn't sound familiar to me, but